My best friend uncovered evidence that could set me free, but taking on the system was like stepping into a lion's den. The judge who sentenced me to 50 years had skeletons so dark, even the devil would be impressed. And there I was, trapped, knowing the truth was eating them alive. But trust me, you haven't heard the most shocking part yet. The courtroom was packed, buzzing with a mix of murmurs, angry whispers, and the occasional gasp. The air felt thick, like the weight of the world had decided to crash down on this one room. Near the window, sitting as still as a statue, was Marcus Williams, a 32-year-old black man who, in the blink of an eye, had lost everything. His freedom, his dignity, and any sliver of faith he had in the justice system. Marcus was not some random guy off the street. He was a hard-working entrepreneur, the proud owner of a small but thriving restaurant in the heart of Atlanta. People loved his food, his charm, and the fact that he treated every customer like family. But none of that mattered the night his life came crashing down. That evening, after closing up his restaurant, Marcus had been driving home, exhausted but content after another successful day. He did not even make it halfway when flashing lights lit up his rearview mirror. Before he could process what was happening, he was yanked out of his car and accused of murder, a crime committed less than a block away from where he had been driving. The evidence? It seemed stacked against him. Fingerprints found on the alleged weapon, a crowbar, matched his. Witnesses swore they saw a man in a black jacket running from the scene, and guess who just happened to be wearing a black jacket that night? Marcus. Oh, and let us not forget the grainy CCTV footage that showed someone vaguely his height and build, a perfect storm of coincidences, or as Marcus later realized, the system doing what it did best, pinning guilt on the nearest black man. When the trial began, the prosecution came out swinging. Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecutor began with a smug grin. This is an open and shut case. The defendant thought he could get away with murder, but justice does not work like that. His tone dripped with arrogance, like he had already won before the first witness even took the stand. Marcus's court-appointed attorney, Mr. Douglas Rayner, barely put up a fight. Let us just say he was not exactly channeling the energy of a fiery defense lawyer from TV dramas. No, Rayner was more like that disinterested substitute teacher who could not care less if the class erupted into chaos. His arguments were weak, his cross-examinations half-hearted, and every time Marcus looked at him for reassurance, all he got was a lazy shrug. If incompetence were an Olympic sport, Rayner would have been taking home gold. The day of the sentencing felt surreal. The courtroom was bursting at the seams with spectators, journalists, and community members. Marcus sat quietly, his face unreadable, but inside his thoughts were racing. This cannot be real. This cannot be happening. I did not do anything. The judge, Richard Carlisle, a 58-year-old white man with tired eyes and an air of impatience, glanced at Marcus like he was a problem that needed solving, not a human being. His voice cut through the tension like a knife as he delivered the verdict. The court sentences the defendant, Marcus Williams, to 50 years in prison without the possibility of parole. For a moment, the room fell completely silent. It was the kind of silence that made your ears ring. Then, chaos erupted. Protesters in the back shouted in outrage. Reporters scrambled to capture every second. And in the middle of it all was Martha Williams, Marcus's mother, sobbing uncontrollably. Her cries pierced through the noise as she yelled, "You are punishing him because he is black. My baby did not do this." Judge Carlisle did not even flinch. He pounded his gavel and barked, "Order in the court." The officers flanked Marcus, ready to take him away, but not before he turned to his mother. His voice was soft but firm as he said, "Do not worry, Mom. This is not over." As they led him out of the courtroom, Marcus glanced back at his so-called lawyer. Rayner gave him one final look, a mix of pity and defeat, and shrugged. It was the most useless gesture Marcus had ever seen. As the courtroom door slammed shut behind him, Marcus knew one thing for certain. The system might have taken his freedom, but it was not taking his fight. Not by a long shot. The cell was cold, dim, and far too quiet for Marcus to ignore the crushing weight of his situation. The metal walls felt like they were closing in, suffocating him with the reality of what just happened. He was staring down the barrel of 50 years for something he did not even do. 50 years. A lifetime stolen because someone needed a scapegoat, and Marcus fit the bill. At first, the pain was unbearable. It gnawed at him like an itch he could not scratch. But as hours turned into days, that pain began to morph into something else. Anger. Pure, seething, white-hot anger. It was not the kind that made you reckless. It was the kind that lit a fire in your gut and refused to die out. He sat on the edge of his cot, staring at the concrete floor. This system thinks it has me beaten, he thought. They think I am just going to rot in here and let it happen. No chance. If they want to play dirty, so can I. The first glimmer of hope came in the form of an unexpected phone call. One of the guards knocked on his cell door and barked, "You have a call." Marcus was surprised. He was not expecting anyone to reach out. But the moment he heard the voice on the other end of the line, a mix of relief and determination washed over him. Marcus? It was James Peter, his childhood friend who had grown up to be a journalist, with a reputation for digging up dirt no one else wanted to touch. "Listen, man, I have been following your case. This whole thing reeks. I am talking rotten to the core. Give me the green light and I will start digging." Marcus clutched the receiver tightly. What choice did he have? He was a man with nothing left to lose. "Do it, James. Find out the truth, no matter how deep it goes." James wasted no time. Within days, he was knee-deep in court records, surveillance footage, and witness statements. It did not take long for the cracks in the prosecution's so-called airtight case to show. First, there was the surveillance footage, the camera that allegedly caught Marcus running from the scene. It was grainier than a decades-old VHS tape. Identifying anyone from that footage would be like trying to recognize a friend in a foggy mirror. Then, there were the witnesses. Both had criminal records that could fill a library, and their stories were all over the place. One claimed to have seen Marcus sprinting away, but his description of the suspect's height and build was completely off. The other swore Marcus had confessed to the crime in a bar, except Marcus had not been to a bar in months. But the real bombshell came when James started looking into Judge Carlisle's history. It turned out Marcus's case was not the first time the judge had been accused of bias. Carlisle had a track record of handing down harsh sentences to black defendants, often based on flimsy evidence. And while a few of his rulings had been overturned on appeal, he never publicly admitted fault. He just kept presiding over case after case, like nothing ever happened. As James dug deeper, the web of corruption grew more tangled. He uncovered a connection between Carlisle and the local prosecutor, a man notorious for his discriminatory practices. The two had known each other for years, and there were whispers that they worked together to secure convictions, no matter the cost. It was not just a bad judge, it was a system built to crush people like Marcus. James knew he needed more. That is when he tracked down Bethany Harper, a former court employee with a less than clean record of her own. She was hesitant at first, but when James hinted at exposing some of her old schemes, she caved. "Fine, I will tell you what I know, but you did not hear it from me." What Bethany revealed sent chills down James's spine. On the day of Marcus's sentencing, Carlisle had received a large sum of money from an unnamed source. The timing was too perfect to ignore. Someone wanted Marcus gone, and they were willing to pay to make it happen. James hung up the phone and sat back in his chair. He had uncovered enough to shake the entire foundation of the case, but this was just the beginning. The deeper he went, the more it became clear. This was not about one man's innocence. It was about exposing an entire system designed to bury people like Marcus alive. And James? He was ready to take it all down, one piece at a time. Marcus sat on the edge of his cot, gripping the phone tightly as James filled him in. Every detail, every lie, every cover-up. The system was rotten, and now Marcus had the proof. He felt a fire rise in his chest, not just anger, but determination. "You need to go public, James. Take it to the media. Let everyone know what these people are doing," Marcus said, his voice steady but intense. James hesitated. "Look, Marcus, I get it. Believe me, I do. But this is not as simple as it sounds. If I blow this story up right now, we could both end up in serious trouble. We are talking about people with power. Real power. I need to do this the right way, or they will bury us before we even get the chance to speak." Marcus clenched his jaw, the frustration almost too much to bear. "Do what you have to, but do it fast. I am not wasting my life in here because some crooked judge decided I was convenient." James knew Marcus was right, but he also knew the risks. So instead of going straight to the press, he decided to dig deeper. If he was going to take down Judge Carlisle, he needed more than circumstantial evidence. He needed witnesses, people who could expose the system from the inside. That is when he found Raymond Lewis, a 45-year-old former inmate who had spent years in prison after being convicted in Carlisle's court. Raymond had always claimed he was framed, and now James had the chance to prove it. When James tracked him down, Raymond was reluctant at first. "Man, I already paid my dues. Why would I stick my neck out now? Carlisle is bad news. You do not mess with people like him." James leaned forward, his tone firm. "Raymond, this is not just about you. It is about every single person he has railroaded. Marcus is sitting in a cell right now for something he didn't do. Do you really want to let that slide?" After a long pause, Raymond sighed. "All right, I will talk, but you better have my back when this blows up." Raymond's story was the tipping point. He described how evidence had been fabricated against him, how witnesses had been coerced, and how Carlisle had ignored every piece of contradictory evidence. His testimony was damning, but it was not enough. James kept digging, reaching out to others who had faced Carlisle's courtroom. Slowly, a pattern emerged. Case after case of rushed judgments, manipulated evidence, and disproportionately harsh sentences, all targeting people who could not afford proper defense. Within weeks, James had built a coalition of voices ready to speak out. Each person had a story to tell, and together they painted a picture of a corrupt system designed to prey on the vulnerable. Finally, after weeks of sleepless nights and countless interviews, James was ready to go public. He released a detailed exposé, complete with testimonies, documents, and damning evidence against Carlisle. The story hit like a bombshell. Headlines screamed about the scandal, judge under fire for corruption and bias. News anchors dissected every detail of James's report, and social media exploded with outrage. Within hours, Carlisle's name was trending nationwide. The pressure was immediate. Federal investigators opened an inquiry, and Carlisle faced mounting scrutiny from his colleagues and the public. The evidence was overwhelming: secret payments, ties to influential political figures, and a clear pattern of racial discrimination. As the investigation unfolded, Marcus's case was re-examined. The fabricated evidence and coerced witnesses were exposed, and the charges against him were dropped. On the day of his release, Marcus stepped out of the courthouse, the sunlight almost blinding after months in the dark. His mother, Martha, was waiting for him, tears streaming down her face as she pulled him into a tight embrace. Marcus looked into her eyes, his voice steady but resolute. "I am free now, Mom, but this fight is not over. We are just getting started." The crowd outside erupted in cheers as Marcus walked down the steps, his head held high. This was not just a victory for him. It was a victory for everyone who had ever been wronged by a broken system. But Marcus knew the battle for justice was far from over. For the first time in months, though, he felt hope. And that was a start. What would you do in Marcus's place? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your opinion matters. Like and share the story to raise awareness and inspire change. This story was created to highlight injustice and make the world better. Your voice makes a difference.